In the year that George Orwell's diaries were finally published as a blog, the organisers of the Orwell Prize for Political Writing have followed on from that by instigating a best blog category. We've got good reason to believe that Orwell would have appreciated the advent of the blog, because the bloggers really came into their own during the recent US presidential election. They've been assiduously chronicling each twist and turn of the credit crunch too. Seems everyone's got an opinion these days, and they are more than keen to share it. With so many blogs out there, isn't it about time we gave the really good ones, the worthy ones, some recognition? With me now, the director of the Orwell Prize, Professor Seaton, and Stuart Evers is back with us, a regular blogger himself. Jean, you're opening up the Orwell Prize to include the blog this year. What's the point of doing that now?
Well, we've got a special prize just this 1 year because actually we've blogged the diary, which has led to an incredible kind of worldwide interest, actually. I think it's something to do with publishing a diary as Orwell wrote it in real time, bit by bit. So it seemed obvious to us, because the prize exists to, in a sense, help us all kind of find the best books to read about politics, find the best writing about politics in journalism. So it seemed absolutely obvious to try and produce, to celebrate some of the best writing on blogs. And in a way, that I think is a kind of mechanism to try and direct people towards blogs which are perhaps, beautifully written and genuinely radical in how they think about politics.
Well, what better example than Orwell? Because, of course, his blogs, you have an absolutely fascinating insight. We see that he likes his morning egg, but they can also provide an amazing window into this man's thoughts, his motivations, and how that worked its way through the books and the writings.
I think as you go on into next year, as in the run-up to the Second World War, you'll find a kind of turmoil breaking out into Orwell, which is really, really, you see his mind moving as he moves into war. And I think the other thing is that when you know the rest of his books, those diaries and that kind of doing it day by day so fit both into the novel he was writing at the time, which was coming up for air, but in realigning him into the great writer he was to become in 1984 and Animal Farm. So it's you really see him hunting facts. He never mentions anything personal. I mean, one of the extraordinary things about this diary is that he's incredibly ill. About a month ago in the diary, he was just fantastically ill. And in this wonderfully stoic, I think sort of rather heroic way, he never mentions that, chest a little bad, he said. So you really get a sense of how he thinks. I think that's what you get from it.
Stuart, have you ever looked at this blog? I'm just going to ask Stuart if he's checked this out. What do you make of it?
There's a lot about eggs.
Come on, there's more about it.
There's an awful lot about eggs, but in a curiously zen way. I mean, one of the great moments of the blogs are actually to read some of the responses, which are quite hysterical. Actually, the way that the people react to it. But what's interesting about it is using it as a diary, as a blog, because diaries and blogs are very different things. I mean, although people do write diaries for public consumption in a weird kind of way, weblogs are very, very public. They're very, very outspoken. That's the very nature of them. And what's odd about reading the Orwell things is they're so sort of intimate and so they're just for him. And having them sort of beamed out gives them a curious kind of power, far more than, it's like you're sort of spying on this great character. And I think one of the interesting things is that no other writer, I think, of the last 100 years would cause this kind of interest. I mean, there's an article in Time magazine about whether this was an ethical thing to do, whether we should know about Orwell's obsession with eggs or not. And
you'll see as the year goes on. I mean, I think there's two things you get from Orwell, from the diary. One of which is a sort of an extraordinary hunger and relentless drive towards facts. And the eggs, in a sense, are part of that. And the eggs are also part of some wonderful recipes. And as we go into next year, it'll become much more political. And, of course, I just rewatched Mike Radford's rather wonderful film of 1984. And food for Orwell is a kind of rather interesting, it's a sign of decency. It's a kind of, plain good food. And indeed, giving other people food is for him a mark of a decent society, which is rather an interesting fact, which I don't think I'd have got unless I'd seen how concerned he was with eggs and planting things.
Well, the thing is, he is fascinating even on eggs, and Stuart's saying that as well. But, you know, he is at the top of his game. He's a fantastic writer. We do want to know more about him. He lends himself entirely
Well, he's a
to
fantastic
the blog.
chap, actually.
Yes,
but very recently, Peter Davidson, who's a wonderful gentleman who'd edited, you know, a lot of this stuff 25 years ago, I had lunch with him, and he said Orwell never accepted any royalties, though he was very clear to make sure that the publishers got their bit of the royalties. But he personally never accepted any royalties from any country in which any book was published of his which was a tyranny.
A very principled moral man.
Yeah.
Stuart, I've got to say, I mean, Orwell's the top of the tree, isn't he? Isn't there a danger, though, with us letter morsels? That if we're doing blogs, they are essentially people's opinions. They are the sort of green pen de nos jours. We're not exactly known for our objectivity when we're blogging, are we?
Well, that's absolutely correct. I mean, the problem with blogs, and their great joy as well, is the fact that they're untrammeled emotion a lot of the times. You've got people pouring out their thoughts. And it's actually, what's interesting about this prize is that it's celebrating the blogs that are a little bit more than just bluster and you know, braggart's opinions. What it's trying to do is point you in the direction of the kind of people who are writing the kind of things that Orwell perhaps would have written himself or perhaps have read himself.
I think I think blogs are of huge, don't you, of hugely different varieties.
Well, Jean, I'm going to have to cut you off there because we're about to run out of time, and I must ask you about this prize.
Submit.
Well, yes, this is the point. I'm just wondering what you're looking for in the form of entries. What sort of thing? Some hints here, very quick.
There has to be a discernible British collection, either in audience or where they originated from. They have to be well written and original politically. It's about turning political writing into an art.
That's simple. There we go. No problem at all. Jean, thank you so much. Stuart, thank you very much for being patient and staying on. We're going to have to leave it there. More information on that Orwell Prize, go to theorwellprize.co.uk.